My guest is Brian Wallace of the Laundry Association. He's the president and has been with them for 30 years. So if you wanted to learn about laundromats, today is the day to do it. So thank you very much, Brian, for being here.
No, thank you, Mark. It's great to talk shop anytime I have the opportunity. So thanks for having me.
So you've been in the industry for over 30 years. How did you find your way into laundromats in the first place?
Well, much like yourself and most everyone else I run into, no one planned on this. Wasn't really the original direction. And in my case, it's pretty straightforward. I was simply looking for a job. Just out of school and had a communications degree, and I had sort of understood that nonprofits, especially trade associations, are always looking for people to write and to support their marketing efforts. And so I really came on board here at the association as my first job out of school. So call me a lifer. That's 32 years ago, almost to the day. And as time went on, I really just over time, it became, from sort of that job, just need a job to sort of something I wanted to pursue as a career. And then hopefully by now, more of a vocation where just really came to really love working with entrepreneurs and doing whatever I can to support their entrepreneurial journeys, and just a great business filled with great people. And so the job has been very much varied in a lot of different ways, and get to sort of get involved with different types of business endeavors in the course of being in the association world. So it's more than held my interest for more than 3 decades now.
Yeah, I did not know you had a communications degree. And I feel like now we're best friends because I also have a communications degree from Rutgers. So
Yeah, well, I guess it's only natural you end up in laundry.
maybe. So what have you seen as the biggest change in the last 30 years since you started?
Wow, wow, it just looks so different than it did 30 years ago. If I had to pick one thing, at least where my mind goes first, is really your attitude as laundromat owners and really centering the customer. This customer focus is something that I really didn't see as much, honestly, in decades gone by. This was sort of still, a couple decades ago, viewed as more of a utilitarian exercise. Just get the equipment out there, make sure it works, let the people use it, and that's that. Whereas today, I just think that there's more focus on making those visits more comfortable, more convenient. And of course, laundromat owners looking for ways to further support the communities where they do business. So I would say the focus on the end user, the focus on the customer, would probably be the biggest change in that 30-year time.
So how would you describe the current state of the laundry industry?
It's hot. It's popular. We sort of have a couple different ways to look at it, right? You have sort of those of you that are existing operators running that day to day. And I think from that perspective, what you're seeing is, a healthy business. I think buoyed somewhat by the essential business designation during the pandemic and our ability to stay open when so many other businesses were not able to, and be able to have that continuity with our customers and continue to operate our businesses. So I think the day-to-day life of the laundromat operator is certainly not perfect, and we can talk about headwinds and tailwinds as we go along here. But I think the industry is certainly very strong. I think kind of from almost like an external point of view, that's where I was kind of joking that the industry is hot, right? It's a hot topic on social media. There's a lot of interest sort of built around aspiring first-time laundromat owners. And so sort of enjoy that excitement. I think part of our job is to try to help people navigate that flood of information a little bit and start to zero in on the facts and the information that's going to help those individuals make the best decisions when it comes to buying or building their first laundromat. But I think the industry is healthy as I've seen it in my 32 years.
Yes, and I think for the listeners, one of the big things with the social media is just don't buy into the hype that it's a passive income. All the best owners that I know, they are highly involved in their stores. They might not work there 40 hours a week, but it's not a half hour a week of just collecting quarters and, driving a Lamborghini. It's like any other business. You have to put the work in. So there's a lot of good information out there, but there's also a lot of information that I think makes it seem much too easy. And it's work just like any other. So
Yeah,
what do
there are some misperceptions. You're right, Mark. I mean, there definitely are some misperceptions, and I think part of our job here is a as an industry trade association and someone who's here with a stewardship role is absolutely encourage people to look at the business. We've always done that. I do new investor courses every month forever. But yeah, people tend to sort of underestimate the amount of time that's required and perhaps also underestimate the size of the investment required. Those are all things that people can work through and better understand. But in terms of sort of the superficial understanding that people have, part of our job is to try to educate and improve that understanding.
What do you think are some of the key trends shaping the industry today?
Yeah, so many things going on. It probably sounds trite at this point to talk about technology, but technology continues to have a big impact on our business. We talked about social media content, embracing that part of the way that we all consume information. If you look at the equipment we use in terms of not just the efficiency of the washers and dryers, but the controls and the networkability, payment systems, all things that serve to sort of make that wash day experience more pleasant and more enjoyable for the end customer, but also sort of empower the business owner to manage the business better and have even more economy with the hours that you're putting into the business. There's a huge trend now in retools and re-equips. Really what that means is taking those rundown stores that don't look like they've been touched in decades and bringing them to life and understanding that quite often it's not the location that fails. It may be the owner operator who failed in the ability to sort of actively manage the business and finding lots of diamonds in the rough, being able to not only spruce up the stores, re-equip them, sort of take a tired, rundown, underperforming store and make it an all-star. Love to see those trends as well. Trend toward multi-store management, right? Even just a decade ago or two, folks were looking for sort of a side hustle, a moonlighting opportunity. Just get me a store that I can work on the side. And nowadays, I see just an acceleration toward adding that second, third, fourth store. The boom in wash, dry, fold, and delivery is definitely on that top five for trends. So a lot of things happening in the business right now that have people excited, both raising the level of service to that end customer, but also providing even more business opportunities for laundromat owners.
Yeah, I think the two big things that I see, especially for my stores, technology with the POS system. I mean, we happen to use Sense, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of great companies out there. Um, and I mean, gone, I think, are the days where you can, do pickup and delivery, wash and fold with, just writing everything down. I always, I kept when I bought our store, the notebook that the old owners had, and more just like an out of nostalgia. But I always thought that like you're one Starbucks spill away from like losing like all your records. And the other
Well,
big
yeah.
trend I see, I'm sorry to cut you off. The other big trend I see is in pickup and delivery.
Hmm.
The COVID taught everybody that you can get basically everything delivered to you, whether it's Walgreens and your prescription, whether it's Burger King and your combo meal, and also your laundry. I like to joke with people that ask me about getting into the industry. Um, anybody who's wearing clothes is a potential customer. Because
Yeah.
now you can go pick up their clothes. They don't have to come to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like how commercial accounts were before this boom in residential delivery, where it wasn't as site dependent, right? You can go out and get the laundry. So whether there's a small business in your area that had towels or rags or aprons or other things, and now. The technology has really unlocked all of this, right? So, those laundromat owners that preceded you, they were sort of using what they had at the time. And now these tools are readily available and again, just unlocking the potential for, again, not just the self-service business to run more smoothly, but the delivery business and the full service is really unlocked. And, for years, we sort of talked about laundry being the next household chore to be outsourced. We saw all these other instances where American families were trading dollars for time, whether that was lawn service or prepared meals or oil changes, or you think about all those sort of mundane drudgery type chores, and laundry always seemed to me to be time consuming and a disliked chore. And so I think we just needed some of the technology and some of that entrepreneurial vigor to be sort of aimed in that direction. And now what we see here is just an absolute boom in wash, dry, fold, and delivery. And it's really exciting to see it.
Yeah, I think the big challenge, at least I know in my store, is just getting the word out that
Mm.
we do pick up and delivery. Because my oldest daughter, when we bought the laundromat, she's like, why would somebody pay you to do their laundry? And I said, for the same reason that a homeowner would pay somebody to do their lawn. They own a house, they can afford a lawnmower, okay? But they don't want to do it in August when it's 95 degrees. They'd rather just have
Right.
somebody else do it and they can
Mhm.
stay in or go do whatever they want. And then once she understood that, she's like, now I get why you people would do pickup and delivery. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges laundromats face today?
Yeah, like I said, we're making it sound all rosy and perfect to this point, but you're right. There's always some headwinds that you have to cope with. I mean, look, running a small business is not easy. I think that just should go without saying, but I always like to put that at the top. But if I look at some of the other challenges, I think you start with costs. Obviously, inflation has driven up the cost of most of the things that we use, whether it's on capital expenditures or the cost of borrowing dollars to re-equip stores, but also just the day-to-day expenses of running the business. If I had to pick one that concerns me the most, I would say the increasing cost of water, in particular the wastewater fees that we are facing and the rates that we're facing as an industry. That's something that seems to be sort of going up unabated year after year. So, things related to the cost of running the business, I think, pose a challenge. I think, like any employer, especially a small business employer, we do have labor challenges with the condition of the labor market now, with sort of a scarcity of applicants. In some cases, you also have that factor related to inflation, whether it be minimum wage or some of the other costs of keeping good employees on board. So I think those are challenges. One thing I've been talking a lot of lately about, Mark, is just the not just the inflation, but the challenge with laundromat insurance, where you've got fewer carriers willing to write our business and looking more carefully from an underwriting standpoint, and of course, looking at premiums going up. So, I think not surprisingly, a lot of the challenges that you face as an individual business owner often relate to the cost of doing business. So, those are a couple of things that come to mind. And again, there are some technology solutions that can help, address some of those issues. But it's not insurmountable. But these are certainly worthy challenges that you're having to face on a day-to-day basis.
For somebody that might be listening and maybe they want to build their own laundromat, what is usually the typical investment? I understand that it can range tremendously based on geography and things, but is there like a general guideline, let's say per square foot if you wanted like a 2,500 square foot store, how much would something like that typically run?
Yeah, I mean, I'd add the further sort of asterisk that if we're talking about building out a new store in an existing space, in other words, you're leasing the space, it doesn't include any real estate. I would say that on a per square foot basis to cover, the build out, utilities, the buying the equipment itself, getting it installed, being open for business. I just looked at a pro forma that from one of our members this morning. It was right at $400, $410 a square foot. So I give people the starting range of $300 to $400 a square foot as the total project cost, excluding real estate, the build out, an existing laundromat, whether it's a vanilla box or a space that's being used for another purpose currently. Certainly see projects that go for more. You see projects that go for less. As you well know, there's a lot of factors that can influence that further. So to the point earlier, I think some people may think that the cost of entry is quite a bit lower than that. And that's not to say you can't find a distressed purchase opportunity to acquire an existing laundromat at a lower dollar amount. But I think when you're talking about a new store build out, so yeah, a typical 2,500 square foot store, I mean, you're talking $1 million and probably needing at least 30% of that in cash to avail yourself of whether conventional lending or some of the captive lending opportunities that are within the industry. Buying an existing laundromat, like I said, you can find them listed for a few $100,000. You can find them listed for a few million. And of course, the devil's in the details of sort of what you're buying in terms of the size of the store, the cash flow, terms and conditions of the lease, age and condition of the equipment. Those are some of the things right off that are going to have an influence on that total project cost.
Now you get to talk to everybody in the industry. So you are friends and you have spoken to all the best owners. What most do you think contributes to their profitability, the profitability of the best stores?
Yeah, it's a great question because I really love working with entrepreneurs, and you start to see sort of the things that make them tick, which are things like these are people that have a high motor, are willing to work very hard, work long hours, do what it takes to be successful. They sort of have that entrepreneurial attitude. But in terms of the running the business themselves and kind of what are those factors, to our point earlier, I think it has a lot to do with really understanding the cost structure. So if you look at stores that are highly profitable, they probably have rent as a percentage of gross that's 20% of gross sales or less. They're probably in a position where they've got newer equipment and maybe they're operating with an expense ratio for utilities, water, sewer, gas, and electric, maybe as low as 15% of gross. And so there's just some things you can't, you just can't substitute. If it's an older store that's running at 30 or 35% utilities, it's just really difficult to hit that top echelon of profitability. If you're spending 30% of your gross to pay the rent, it's just really hard to hit that upper echelon of profitability. So it's sort of the makeup of the entrepreneur, right? Being self-starting, getting after it, doing what it takes to get the job done, as you said, being hands-on, solving issues. But in terms of the P&L statement, it's really being on top of those key expenses that really make a difference between the all-star locations and the also-rans that are just carrying too much expense.
I think that a lot of people looking to get into the industry don't realize just how important the lease is.
Hmm.
What do you think are some of the things that they should look for in a lease?
Yeah, I get teased sometimes because I'm so focused on the lease, and really that comes out of decades now of counseling first timers as well as existing laundromat owners, and trying to sort of synthesize everyone's experience into best practices around the lease. And as you well understand, Mark, I mean, you can't pick up and move a laundromat, at least not practically, certainly not for beginners. And so, what you have is this cash flowing business that's protected by a lease for a finite amount of time going into the future. And so, the ability to have ample time left on the lease to not just be able to enjoy that cash flow, but service any debt that you have. And the ability to, when it comes time to sell, have something that's saleable to a prospective buyer. I was just talking to a member this morning who is very fortunate. They've run a good store. The equipment's a little bit older. They're looking to sell, but he's got 15 years left on a lease, and he thinks he can maybe get another 5 year extension from the landlord when it comes time to sell now. So that's going to be a premium. The flip side of that is a lot of times, and depends on the market, but a lot of the inventory of existing stores for sale, that's one of the challenges, right? And you look at, well, there's 3 years left on a lease, or 4 years left, or 7 years left. And it really puts, really makes for a tough situation for educated buyers that understand the value. And of course, talking a lot about duration, but as I mentioned, cost, trying to keep it no more than that 20 or 25% of gross. And the fine print. I was working with a member last week who was presented with a very sort of draconian demolition clause that really gave the building owner, the landlord, carte blanche to raise the building with really no remedy or compensation for the business owner who may have 7 years left on an equipment loan or may have a thriving existing business. So, it really does rule your business, and really getting all the help that you possibly can in evaluating that, having the attorneys look at it, having someone who understands a laundromat business look at that lease. Especially on a transaction for acquiring an existing store, it's often the most important, but probably the one that gets underrated in terms of the importance for the overall project.
No, I think that's a good point that it gets underrated because the lease is, let's be honest, it's the least sexy part of it. I mean, if you've ever read
Yeah.
a lease,
Oh,
but I do recommend, because I get people that come to me and want to know, and I say, well, you have to get a lawyer. You have to have a lawyer involved. Do not, read the lease I mean, obviously read your lease, but I wouldn't expect you to understand it all necessarily unless you're very, very experienced in it. But that's what your lawyer is for. Your lawyer is going to, that one sentence that you don't have added, or that the real estate the landlord adds, could be all the difference. And
mhm.
also, like you said, you can't just pick up. I mean, your business is literally bolted to the ground.
That's
A
right.
lot of times I'll see laundromats for sale and I'm like, well, that seems pretty inexpensive, and then I look and it's like, oh, your their lease is up December of 2025. So, I tell people, I mean, you can still pursue it, but the first thing I would do is get the landlord involved and tell the seller, look, if I can't negotiate a new deal, then there is nothing between us because
Right.
I'm
There's
not
nothing to
buying.
buy.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
Yeah, there's really
you're out
nothing
of
to buy.
business in a year. So, what are some of the recent advocacy efforts the association has undertaken? I know that in different states there are different issues that you have to deal with.
Yeah, like most trade associations, and certainly at CLA, advocacy is a big part of what we do. Some people call it lobbying or working the regulatory front. But, big part of our stewardship, responsibility here is to turn away adverse legislation, adverse regulation, obviously will have a negative impact on the industry. So I'd say over a 30-year period, Mark, I think sales tax exemptions at a state level have probably been our I won't say our singular focus, but certainly our primary focus, and certainly by far the issue with which we've had the most engagements, and knock on wood, 100% track record on either reversing those sales taxes that apply to laundromats, but probably 9 out of 10 of those engagements are protecting the existing sales tax exemption. So for the uninitiated, obviously there's sales tax on lots of things, products, and increasingly on services. And we just think that laundries are uniquely qualified to be exempt from collecting sales tax based on the nature of the service we're providing, which is a basic public health service, a matter of hygiene, to whom we're providing it, which tend to be the under-resourced neighborhoods and those families. But also the fact that, sales tax is really intended to be paid by the consumer. And when you're trying to assess a sales tax on a vended transaction, it really becomes a de facto tax on the business owner. And, if someone drops a quarter into a washer, how do you collect 6.75% of that? right? So we've got a couple of real strong arguments, and we've really fine-tuned that over the years. And so sales tax is definitely one of the big ones. From the newer batch in the last year or so, has been the legislation introduced in at least 3 states that would require each and every washing machine to have its own microfiber filter to get after the microplastics pollution. And at the top level, that sounds great. We don't want to be polluters. We want to be good environmental citizens, and we've got a great environmental story to tell as an industry. But these proposed pieces of legislation are really too specific in prescribing really the least feasible possible solution, which is to install a filter on each and every washing machine. And I think that this is really intended by the legislators to have this home application, right? So you put one of those little filters on top of your home washer, and you clean it out every so often and you're good. But they weren't really thinking about is an application where there's 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 washers, each with a filter that would clog very quickly and cause a problem. So almost always, Mark, it's a matter of simply really educating the legislators and regulators. And more often than not, if we get that opportunity and an open ear on the other end, we can sort of state our case. And to this point, we've been able to turn back those microfiber legislations, at least as they relate to commercial washers in our type of environment. So there's always a lot going on, but we have a full-time monitoring function here where we see every single piece of legislation in every state, every federal piece of legislation, every regulation, and looking for things that could negatively impact our business.
Well, one thing you didn't give yourself credit for, though, was during COVID, you helped to keep laundromats open and have them classified as an essential business. So that was huge.
Well, yeah, thanks, Mario. I mean, we're certainly proud of that, and that was definitely a crowdsourced solution. We had so many individual members that helped me in that process. We had friends in the industry from coast to coast keeping us in the loop. We are working that state by state by state basis, very avidly. New Jersey was one of the ones we had to do some extra work on. But ultimately, we were able to handle that. The bigger lift was at the federal level, right, where the first 30 or so, 35 states had sort of made their decisions, and then there were a number of states that were deferring to the feds, and we were not in the guidance at the federal level as an essential business. So that was a much more expensive, much more heavier lift, and we got a lot of support from a number of our industry companies, both financially, but also with connections and the ability to reach the right people. And again, it's just a matter of education. If we can get in front of the decision makers and make the case, it's something that goes a long way. So yeah, I mean, you conservatively looking at that whole effort that we did together, that was a billion, if not a multi-billion-dollar savings for the industry. And perhaps more importantly is people needed us, right? Talk about essential workers. Where do essential workers do their laundry? With us, right? So our ability to stay open and keep that going was just really important, not just from a business perspective, but it's really what our communities needed.
Well, if you think about it, it affects so many people. I mean, like pickup and delivery is a luxury, let's face
Mhm.
it. But if you don't have a washer and a dryer or access to that, I mean, what do you do? Do you send your kids to school with dirty clothes? I mean, it was a great thing that you guys did, and I'm glad that they worked with you on keeping them open. What future trends do you anticipate in the laundry industry? You know, maybe 5, 10 years out. What do you see?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see what future technology, if you just look at, the technological advancements in the last 5 or 10 years, you throw that forward and assume it's going to accelerate. I think it'd be really interesting to see what that looks like, not just on machine operation, but how we communicate with customers. Certainly, there's going to be an AI component. We just had a cover story in our Planet Laundry magazine on that this past month. So I think technology is just a given. I really think that we're going to continue to see this consolidation in the industry. And unlike a lot of other industries that feature sort of a Main Street mom and pop type business. I think this is going to continue to be largely a consolidation from within. In other words, more likely, Mark, you adding another store, another store, another store over time as you see the right opportunities and find yourself with 5, 6, 7 stores. I think that trajectory, that path is going to be further enhanced as we go forward. And and with the advent of some of the folks looking for more of a national presence or even the franchisors, I wouldn't be surprised to see further consolidation in what has got to be the most fragmented. Can't think of anything that could be more fragmented than the laundromat industry is today. So that consolidation, I think, is going to be interesting. And I think for the most part, what I've seen to this point is a continued improvement in the quality of those stores, the profitability of those stores, and the quality with which those stores are taking care of the consumer. So I see that as a real positive trend as well. I think innovation is always going to be a part of any industry discussion. I don't care what business it is. How we're going to continue to evolve how we do business, not just with technology and things like AI, but where things are heading on the utilities front, right? I mentioned wastewater costs earlier. We certainly see the trends in terms of requirements related to climate change, emissions, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're really trying to wrestle with what is sort of a post-fossil fuel laundromat industry look like. So these are all things that are going to be challenges, but I'm very confident in our ability as a community to pull together, tackle tough problems, and understand at the end of the day, the one thing that's not going away, Mark, people still need to wash their clothes, right? And so I think that's going to continue to provide that opportunity for those of us that are laundromat professionals.
Do you think there's going to come a time where we don't use quarters anymore? I know that 78% of stores still take quarters and I know that, I mean, there's card options, you can use debit and credit cards, but do you think you'll ever see a time where it's like, there's just not a laundromat anymore that doesn't take quarters?
Yeah, I think it's going to take time, just like it has to get us to this point. I mean, it really wasn't until last year in our annual benchmarking survey that the hybrid solutions, taking both credit card, debit card, electronic payments, and quarter became the majority in our survey. And the number of quarters as the form of payment dropped down to only about a third of the existing inventory. But that 50 some percent now offering hybrid and the sort of the cashless, being in that 10 to 15% range. So I think it's going to continue to move in that direction. And I'm just viewing that, that was a scan of the whole industry. If you look at that trend among new stores or newly retooled stores, that's even an accelerated factor. Mark, you may also know that some of the advocacy work that we've done has been with folks at the Mint, the cash product office at the Federal Reserve. We had a quarter shortage during the pandemic. And with our relationship that we have with the Treasury Department and the other key folks, I mean, they're planning for less and less cash and certainly coins being used less and less. So it probably has less to do with what my opinion is and just more to do with what the prevailing winds are with the way that people are doing transactions. There was a report out of the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank about a year ago. It was something like fewer than 20% of all retail transactions were in cash during that prior year, and that number keeps clicking down. So, I think our members are doing what works, and the majority of them feel like the hybrid approach works. But if you look at the longer term trends, I think that how we pay for all things, let alone laundry, is going to continue to move in that direction of technology. That being said, we've never had a stronger advocate than us when it comes to issues like coin composition changes, anything to do with the availability of quarters and dollar coins. We certainly step up for the industry and actively lobby on those issues.
I do think that eventually you'll see the quarters go away. It's going to take time though, because
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to necessarily retool an entire store just so that you can take credit cards. But I know, like my daughter, she's 24, doesn't even carry cash. Now that just might be convenient when she's out with dad. I don't really know. I do
Yeah.
think, like a lot of people her age, they don't even use cash anymore. Everything is with the card. If you can't tap it, they can't pay for it. So,
Yeah, and I think that was just again another thing that was accelerated in the pandemic, and that's what came out of some of the conversations. Again, I was able to be part of that, that coin availability task force during COVID. Like I said, working with the Federal Reserve, working with Coinstar, all the different names you would recognize that have something to do with coinage, and everybody sees what direction this is going in. And at the end of the day, I think in a short phrase, I think our members are really pointing toward, I want to take however a customer wants to pay, I want to be able to accept it.
right.
Right. I want to make it as easy for people to pay as possible. And there obviously is still a lot of cash out there. We also serve a lot of underbanked and unbanked communities that may not have those either bank accounts or credit cards, so I think there's also a factor of, like most things in laundromat business, your local demographics driving the way that you do business.
That is totally true. So my last question for you, and I appreciate you being on.
Of course.
You've literally met with thousands, literally, of business owners. So if there's somebody out there listening now who's like, I'd like to get into the laundromat industry, what advice would you give them to maybe start, or where to start looking, or to get their information from?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that come to mind. One of the obvious ones is do your homework. You're not the first to do this. There's a lot of existing information. There's a knowledge base. There's a community, whether it's online or through the association or through peers. So there's no excuse for not doing the homework. So I think that's number one. I think number two is, just be prepared to be persistent, and you're going to have some zigs and zags. Just this morning, I was speaking with a new member, someone who was at our conference last week, and they were fired up. I was looking at a pro forma for this opportunity, and the deal fell through, right? Went sideways with the landlord. And so kind of a step back, but that's part of the pep talk we had today is, look, if it was easy, everybody would do it. You got to be persistent and keep pushing ahead. This last one kind of may sound silly, but one of my favorite pieces of advice that I get a lot of great feedback on is go do a lot of laundry. Go do laundry. Put a couple loads of laundry in your car and stop at every laundromat you see. Get in there, understand what that environment is like, start making note of what you like and what you don't like. Get a better sense if this is for you at all. I mean, is this lifestyle, this day-to-day of the laundromat something that appeals to you? So do your homework, get connected, get ready to be persistent, and go do a bunch of laundry, and you're going to learn a lot.
I think that's great advice about doing the laundry because as an active owner, one of the things that I do is, I check out the competition, go do a load of laundry. But that's also what I did when I was trying to learn about the industry, because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And then when you actually see it, I mean, like I have a YouTube channel, but I mean, look, there's only so much you can learn from, reading a book or video, things like that. You just have to go out there a lot of times and do it. And like you said, see what you're getting into and see if this is, something that you would enjoy. I would also recommend listeners that if you're really serious about it, getting into the industry, join the Coin Laundry Association. One of the things, Brian, that impressed me was when I joined, I got a phone call from you. I never
Mhm.
expected that, to be totally honest with you. I joined, I thought it was a good thing to do for the business and for my learning curve, and then I got sent like an email with like your calendar, and it's like set up a call, and it's like, here's the president of this large organization, and yeah, we just talked for like a half hour, just laundry and hi, how you doing type of thing. So I would definitely recommend joining the Coin Laundry Association. And also, you have a free publication, Planet Laundry. So anybody that comes to me that says, "Yeah, I'm looking to get in, I'm looking for information," I say go on the CLA website and subscribe to Planet Laundry. It's free, it's every month, and it's the best of the best operators are in there. So,
Yeah, well, thank
Brian,
you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. We appreciate the recommendation, and we like to say, spend a few $100s before you spend a few 100,000. Get all the information you can, and we'll certainly make sure that if anything else, you've got a friend in the business to get you started. And you're right, planetlaundry.com, the magazine itself, all the archives. There's 30 years of knowledge base about the industry. It's just up to you to go find it and read it and make it part of your plan going forward.
well, I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate you, Brian, coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Oh, you're very welcome.